Good evening. Tonight's video will be another Magic the Gathering video. I'm going to show another one of my commander decks. This one is very much a work in progress, but I think overall it plays fairly well. Alright, so this deck is a green-white commander deck. This is my commander. Latheo the Bounteous Hunt, Bounteous Dawn, legendary creature, unicorn. He has lifelink at the beginning of each end step. If you gained life this turn, distribute up to that many 1/1 counters among any number of other target creatures. Weeping, the hunter cast aside her bow, struck by the majesty of the creature before her. So my commander needs 1 white, 1 green, and 2 colorless. So he's not too difficult to get onto my battlefield, which is really nice. So I have played this quite a few times, and it is a work in progress. I think mainly the lands need some upgrading. I don't think I have very many dual lands in here, so that's a little bit of a disadvantage, but that's okay. I think the times that I have played this one, it still has worked out quite well. I'm able to get quite a few different creatures onto the field fairly quickly, and then they end up kind of ramping up, because it's kind of that 1/1 counter deck. The goal is to get 1/1 counters onto my creatures, and then they'll start ramping themselves up as the game plays on. So you end up with some pretty robust creatures on the field fairly quickly. So I don't think there is that many cards that are critical to how it plays. They're all rather important, I think, in this particular deck. But there are a few that I've kind of placed on top here. That I think maybe are a little more important than the others. So, first one. Spike Feeder. Spike Feeder. Summon Spike. He's 2 green, 1 colorless. Spike Feeder comes into play with 2 1/1 counters on it. There is a sort of middle spell here that I tend to ignore, but the bottom one says remove 1/1 counter from Spike Feeder and gain 2 life. So this plays nicely with my commander, who, at the beginning of each end step, if you've gained life this turn, distribute that many 1/1 counters among any number of other target creatures. So I can remove counters from this to trigger this, and it will just help ramp up my creatures. Next is Nyxos Paragon. He's a little bit more expensive to play. He's 4 colorless, 2 white. He's an enchantment creature, human soldier. Whenever you gain life, you may put that many 1/1 counters on each creature you control. Do this once each turn. Though Heliod turned against humanity, in his hunger for power, the ideals he once championed still stand strong. So that's just another, trigger for my 1/1 counters in addition to my commander. So next one, Vorinclex Monstrous Raider. He's 2 green, 4 colorless, so again a little expensive, but still a very good creature. He's a legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor, Trample, and Haste. If you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many of each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead. If an opponent would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, they put half as many of each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead, rounded down. So that's really nice. If you have him out, it's going to double everything that's coming from these. So, very nice card for this particular deck. Another one, Hydra's Growth. I really like the art on that particular one. Hydra's Growth, enchantment and aura. So enchant creature. When Hydra's Growth enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on enchanted creature. At the beginning of your upkeep, double the number of 1/1 counters on the enchanted creature. So, just another way to ramp up those 1/1 counters. So those are kind of, I think, the nicest cards to kind of go along with the theme of the deck, but there are a lot of other creatures in here that I think also do very well. Next is Halioid Sun-Crowned. He's a legendary enchantment creature. He's a god. He's indestructible. As long as your devotion to white is less than 5, Halioid isn't a creature. Whenever you gain life, put a 1/1 counter on target creature or enchantment you control. And then, colorless and a white, another target creature gains a lifelink until the end of turn. So this is a nice creature for putting lifelink onto, any creature I choose, which will then trigger more 1/1 counters. Next one, Cather's Crusade, an enchantment. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. So, and that's each creature I have. Basri Cat. He's a legendary planeswalker, Basri. So, his first step here, you put a 1/1 counter on up to 1 target creature, and it gains indestructible until end of turn. -2, whenever 1 or more non-token creatures attack this turn, create that many 1/1 white soldier creature tokens that are tapped and attacking. And -6, you get an emblem with, at the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token, then put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. Just a land, basic land, plains. Kind of looks like a city of some kind. Ashea, Soul of the Wind, or Soul of the Wild, sorry. Legendary creature, he's an elemental. Ashea, Soul of the Wild's power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control. Non-token creatures you control are forest lands in addition to their other types. They are still affected by summoning sickness. Rishkar, Pima, Renegade. Legendary creature and elf druid. When Rishkar, Pima Renegade, or Pima Renegade, enters the battlefield under a 1/1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures, each creature you control with a counter on it has a tap to add 1 mana or 1 land. Aether is the soul of Kaladesh, and all souls should be free. So he only costs 1 green, 2 colorless to cast. So, and I think a lot of the creatures are fairly, easy to get onto the battlefield. This is one of my favorite arts for a forest in the deck. It's really beautiful. Thriving Hearth, or Heath. Thriving Heath enters the battlefield tapped. As Thriving Heath enters the battlefield, choose a color other than white. So I would choose my forest, my green of course. So you can tap to add either a white or a mana of the chosen color. Wildflowers here bloom not with the season, but with the ebb and flow of magic. So not really a dual land, I guess, but sort of. Wildwood Scourge. Creatures a Hydra. Wildwood Scourge enters the battlefield with X 1/1 counters. Whenever one or more 1/1 counters are put on another non-Hydra creature you control, put a 1/1 counter on Wildwood Scourge. So this one could ramp up fairly quickly because you're putting a lot of 1/1 counters on non-Hydra creatures. This one is, I was able to get this one out the last couple times I played this deck, and I found it really nice to kind of, I guess, additional way to ramp up your creatures. Unnatural Growth. It is a little expensive though. So I need 4 green, 1 colorless. At the beginning of each combat, double the power and toughness of each creature you control until the end of turn. With the cycles of day and night unspooled, the twisted sway of the moon only grew and grew. So I really like the art on that one too. It's got like a very large werewolf, kind of an old fantasy town there. So this one is a Defiant Strike. 1 white. It is an instant. Target creature gets +1, +0 until the end of turn, and I can draw a card. So drawing a card will help me hopefully get more land out to help me get some of these more expensive cards out. Trilisara, Moon Dancer. Legendary creature, Elf Cleric. Whenever you gain life, put a 1/1 counter on Trilisara, Moon Dancer, and scry 1. Scrying means that you look at the top card of your library, and you may then put that card on the bottom of your library, or leave it where it is. Forest, Plains. This one's really pretty artwork on it. This one is another forest. Again, I think the art's kind of neat on that one too. Rock's Faithmender, creature, a Rhino Monk. He has lifelink. If you would gain life, you gain twice that much life instead. Roxes, who live long enough to retire from war, lend support with their extensive knowledge of combat injuries. So that's nice to work with my commander any life that I gain, I get that many 1/1 counters. Another plains. And another forest. Jang Yangu, Wildcrafter, legendary planeswalker, Yangu. Each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it has a tap to add 1 mana of any kind. -1, put a 1/1 counter on a target creature. So he's pretty nice. It's just another really good mana source to get some of those more expensive cards out. Torrens, Fist of the Angels. So he's a legendary creature, human cleric. He only costs 1 colorless, 1 green, and 1 white. Training, so whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 green and white human soldier token with training. I think the art's pretty nice on that one too. Forest, plains, and this one, it's pretty nice. Maybe even sure. It's kind of like a bunch of rocks and wind. I don't know. It looks beautiful. And another forest. So, Basri's Lieutenant, creature, human knight, vigilance protection from multicolored. When Basri's Lieutenant enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. Whenever Basri's Lieutenant or another creature you control dies, if it had a 1/1 counter on it, create a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance. I like vigilance because then you don't have to tap your creature when you attack, which is always nice. Snow-colored plains. The snow-covered part doesn't really do too much for this deck, but it's a pretty card. So this one is Drizzit, Duarden, legendary creature, elf ranger, double strike. When Drizzit Duarden enters the battlefield, create a Rune Wyvern, a legendary 4/1 green cat creature token with trample. Whenever a creature dies, if it had a power greater than that of Drizzit's power, put a number of 1/1 counters on Drizzit equal to the difference. I don't think I've ever actually been able to get this card out on any of my playthroughs. This one, I really like the art on this one too. Cultivator Colossus. He's very expensive to get out. He is a 4 colorless and 3 green. So, creature, plant beast. He has trample. Cultivator Colossus's power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands that you control. When Cultivator Colossus enters the battlefield, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. If you do, draw a card and repeat this process. So, you could end up with a lot of extra lands if you happen to hit a land pocket or something in there, but if you already have a lot of lands, he's going to be a pretty hefty card. Commander's Sphere. This is an artifact, so I can tap to add 1 mana of any color in my commander's color identity, so a green or a white. I can sacrifice the commander's spear to draw a card. It harmonizes with the essence of its master. Forest. This one is Grace or Grace, I'm not sure how to pronounce that one. It's an instant. Remove target enchantment from game. Perception is more pleasing than the truth. So, just a utility card, really. Basri's Solidarity. 1 colorless, 1 white to get this one out. Sorcery. Put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. The will to fight and act as one is not limited to a single world. Oketra's teachings are universal. Basri Get. Ajani's Pridemate. This one only costs 1 colorless and 1 white. I feel like I get this one out almost every time I play. Creature is a cat soldier. Whenever you gain life, put a 1/1 counter on Ajani's Pridemate. Planeswalkers conjured replicas of old allies, reminders of the homeworlds that would fall next if Bolas prevailed. This next one is a druid class, so it's an enchantment. Gain the next level as a sorcery to add to its ability. So whenever this land enters, or whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life, which then would trigger my commander. My level 2, which is 2 colorless and a green, you may play an additional land on each of your turns, which could be helpful, but sometimes it's hard to have that many in your hand. And level 3 is 4 colorless and 1 green. When this class becomes level 3, target land you control becomes a creature with haste, and this creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of lands you control. It's still a land. This one is called Pledge of Unity, and it is 1 colorless, 1 green, and 1 white. So this is an instant. Put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. You gain 1 life for each creature you control. No one hero will save this day. Today, we must all be heroes. Gideon Jura. So that's also another good way to trigger more 1/1 counters. Command Tower. This is a land. Tap to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. When defeat is near and guidance is scarce, all eyes look in one direction. This one is called Akroma's Will. It is 1 white and 3 colorless. It is an instant. Choose 1. If you control a commander as you cast this spell, you may choose both. Creatures you control gain flying, vigilance, and double strike until the end of turn. Creatures you control gain lifelink, indestructible, and protection from all colors until the end of turn. So I like the art on that one too. Bunch of, they're riding tigers and leopards. Not sure. Very cool. So this one I really like as well. It's called Froggymoth, and he is a little expensive at 3 colorless, 2 green. He's a creature frog horror, and he's like a big monster creature who's got a, troll or something in his hands. He has trample and haste. Whenever Froggymoth deals combat damage to a player, exile up to that many target cards from their graveyard. Put a 1/1 counter on Froggymoth for each creature card exiled this way. You gain 1 life for each non-creature card exiled this way. So, possibly a good way to get more 1/1 counters. Scorch Regent, 3 colorless, 2 white. He's a creature and a dragon. Flying, whenever an opponent casts a spell, put a 1/1 counter on Scorch Regent, and you will gain 1 life. We trust in the Scale Lords, bringers of justice, that none can escape. Erdnan Dramuka, warrior. Evolution Sage. This one is pretty inexpensive at 2 colorless, 1 green. He's a creature elf druid. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, proliferate. Choose any number of permanents and or players, then give each another counter of each kind already there. To care for yourself, cultivate the world. To care for the world, cultivate. This one is Disenchant, 1 white, 1 colorless. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. The swarm seemed unmoved by the artificial sliver's destruction. They clearly were not the leaders. Hana cursed. I guess we'll have to do this the hard way. A plane. So I like this card. It's called Pride Mulkin. It is a creature cat. He costs 1 green, 2 colorless to get out. When Pride Mulkin enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. Each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it has trample. They can deal excess combat damage to a player or planeswalker they're attacking. So even if somebody blocks, if the power of Pride Mulkin is more, it will go to the actual player. This one is Rift Sower. So, I don't know, it's got like an elf with a portal or something of some kind. Or maybe a rift, I don't know. So it is a creature elf druid. I can tap to add 1 mana of any color, suspend for 2, and pay 1 green. So that means rather than cast this card from your hand, you may pay 1 green and exile it with 2 time counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a time counter. When the last is removed, cast it without paying its mana cost. And now it has haste. Plains. Weather the Storm is an instant, 1 green, 1 colorless. You gain 3 life, and it has Storm, so when you cast this spell, copy it for each spell cast before it in this turn. Neither Blade nor Tempest can assail the serenity of a tranquil mind. The Tararu carvings. Ornithopter of Paradise. Artifact creature. Thopter. He has flying, and I can tap to add 1 mana of any color. Through even the darkest days, we must never cease creating. Each new invention brings value to the world, be it beauty, utility, or both. Roshmi Aetherseer. It's rather true, I think. Please. Cleric class. So this is an enchantment. So if you would gain life, you gain that much life plus 1 instead. And again, playing off my commander to create more 1/1 tokens. Level 2, I need 3 colorless, 1 white. Whenever you gain life, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. Level 3, 4 colorless, 1 white. When this class becomes level 3, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. You gain life equal to its toughness. Trusty Retriever. So I like this one. It's like a little dog in battle armor. So he's really cute. So a creature dog, when Trusty Retriever enters the battlefield, choose 1. Put a 1/1 counter on Trusty Retriever. Return target artifact or enchantment from your graveyard to your hand. Wipe away the slobber and it's as good as new. Give or take a few bite marks. Thriving Grove. This is a land. Thriving Grove enters the battlefield tapped. As Thriving Grove enters the battlefield, choose a color other than green. Tap to add a green or 1 mana of the chosen color. So I would choose white, obviously. Let's see. Voice of the Blessed. 2 white, creature, spirit, cleric. Whenever you gain life, put a 1/1 counter on Voice of the Blessed. As long as Voice of the Blessed has 4 or more 1/1 counters on it, it has flying and vigilance. As long as Voice of the Blessed has 10 or more 1/1 counters on it, it has indestructible. Forest. Plains. Biblioplex is a land. I can tap to add a colorless. I can pay 2 colorless and tap to look at the top card of my library. If it's an instant or sorcery card, I may reveal it and put it in my hand. If you don't put the card in your hand, you may put it into your graveyard. Activate only if you have exactly 0 or 7 cards in hand. Forest. That one's pretty. Inspiring Call. 2 colorless, 1 green is an instant. Draw a card for each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it. Those creatures green, indestructible until end of turn. Damage and effects that say destroy, don't destroy them. Now is the hour, ours is the duty. For victory and family, charge. A Vivid Meadow. Vivid Meadow comes into play tapped with 2 charge counters on it. Tap to add 1 white mana to your pool. Tap to remove a charge counter from Vivid Meadow and add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. It's kind of a pretty tree with some rainbows in there. Rite of Harmony. 1 green, 1 white. Whenever a creature or enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, this turn, draw a card. It has flashback. I'd have to pay 2 colorless, 1 green and 1 white. You may cast this card from your graveyard for its flashback cost, and then exile it. Nature bends to the witch's call. Deepwood Dennison. He's a creature, elf warrior, with vigilance. So I can pay 5 colorless, 1 green to tap and draw 1 card. This ability costs 1 colorless less to activate for each 1/1 counter on creatures you control. You didn't come all this way just to bother me, did you? Say your piece and be gone. Hopeful Insight. Creature, human warlock, with training, so whenever this creature attacks with another creature with greater power, put a 1/1 counter on this creature. I can pay 2 colorless and 1 white to remove 2 1/1 counters from among creatures you control. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Possibly useful. Sigarda Splendor. 2 white, 2 colorless. As an enchantment, as Sigarda Splendor enters the battlefield, note your life's total. At the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card if your life's total is greater than the equal to the last noted life total for Sigarda Splendor. Then note your life's total. Whenever you cast a white spell, you gain 1 life. One forest. That one's a cool forest. 1 plains. Invigorating Surge is an instant. 2 colorless, 1 green. Put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control, then double the number of 1/1 counters on that creature. For Hydras, most problems can be solved with the addition of a few extra heads. Forest. Thrive. X. 1 green is a sorcery. Put a 1/1 counter on each of X target creatures. We wait and watch, and as we prepare for war, we grow strong. Contortionist Trope. creature human. Contortionist troop enters the battlefield with X/1/1 counters on it. It has Coven, so at the beginning of your end step, if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. Jester's Cap. Artifact. 2 colorless and a tap. Sacrifice Jester's Cap. Look through the target player's library and remove any 3 of those cards from the game. Shuffle the library afterwards. Know your foe's strengths as well as their weaknesses. Arkham, Daxon, Soldevi, Machinist. Forest, Plains, Shamanic Revelation. Sorcery. Draw a card for each creature you control. Ferocious. You gain 4 life for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. First whispers of ancient days, then visions of things to come. Bond of Discipline. Sorcery. Tap all creatures your opponents control. Creatures you control gain lifelink until end of turn. We agree that order benefits everyone, but not until you enforce it. The Cracklin Beast Summon. Cracklin comes into play with X/1/1 counters on it. 1 colorless, 1 green to regenerate Cracklin. A perfect reflection of its world. Brutal, fetal, and lacking truth. Cleansing Nova. 3 colorless, 2 white. Choose 1. Destroy all creatures and destroy all artifacts and enchantments. In their final moments, the demons gazed upon the grace in its purest form. Plains. The Massive Mite. I really like the art on this one too. It's a giant snail attacking a town. This is an instant. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains trample until end of turn. Run, it's coming for us. Eventually. Yasser, Heaven Gauche, Upkeeper. Steward of Valeron. Creature, human druid knight with vigilance. Tap to add a green to your mana pool. Knight Steward's Guard, the sun-doubled court, a grove of immense sculptured olive trees that represent Valeron's 12 noble families. Griffinary. 1 white, 1 colorless, an enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, if you gain 3 or more life this turn, create a 2/2 white griffin token creature with flying. When griffins started nesting atop the northern tower, the Castellan worried they'd be a nuisance. Instead, they took the entire castle under their protection. Crushing Canopy. An instant. Choose 1. Destroy target creature with flying or destroy target enchantment. Do not mistake your lofty vantage point for safety. Shaper Tuatha. forest. A good fortune unicorn. 1 colorless, 1 green, and 1 white. Creature unicorn. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on that creature, catching even a glimpse of one of its. If one is the start of 8 years of good luck. I wouldn't mind seeing one of those. Light of Promise. An enchantment. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature has, whenever you gain life, put that many 1/1 counters on this creature. The light washed over him, and in the wind he heard the roars of all the bridesmaids who had come before. Terramorph. Sorcery. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. It also has Rebound. If you cast this spell from your hand, exile it as it resolves. At the beginning of your next upkeep, you may cast this card from exile without paying its mana cost. I like that one a lot. Opal Palace. Tap to add 1 colorless, and I can pay 1 colorless and tap to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. If you spend this mana to cast your commander, it enters the battlefield with a number of additional 1/1 counters on it, equal to the number of times it's been cast from the command zone this game. Ochre Jelly. Creature is an ooze and has trample. Ochre Jelly enters the battlefield with X 1/1 counters on it. It has split, so when Ochre Jelly dies, if it had 2 or more 1/1 counters on it, create a token that's a copy of it at the beginning of the next end step. The token enters the battlefield with half that many 1/1 counters on it, rounded down. Faith's Fetters is an enchantment. Enchant permanent. The Faith's Fetters enter the battlefield, you gain 4 life. Enchanted permanent can't attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated unless they're mana abilities. Savior of Ollenbach. A creature, human soldier. It has training. Whenever Savior of Ollenbach trains, exile up to 1 other target creature from the battlefield, or creature card from the graveyard. When Savior of Ollenbach leaves the battlefield, put the exiled card onto the battlefield under their owner's control. Plains. Forest. And Sterling Grove. An enchantment. Other enchantments you control have Shroud, which means they can't be targeted by spells or abilities. I can pay 1 colorless to sacrifice Sterling Grove to search my library for an enchantment card, reveal it, then shuffle, and put that card on top. Just a few more left here. Ollenbach's Escort. Creature's a human cleric with vigilance. Sacrifice Ollenbach's Escort. Target creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it gains lifelink and indestructible until end of turn. Stay in the light. I don't know what lurks in those shadows, and I'd like to keep it that way. Moment of Heroism is an instant. Target creature gets 2/2/2 and gains lifelink until end of turn. My faith is stronger than Fang, Claw, or Mindless Hunger. And last but not least, In Search of Greatness enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may cast a permanent spell from your hand with converted mana cost equal to 1 plus the highest converted mana cost among other permanents you control without paying its mana cost. If you don't, scry 1. So that is my green-white 1/1 counter deck. Again, I feel like it plays fairly well. Obviously, it's a work in progress, could use some improvement, especially where the lands are concerned, but it's been a pretty fun deck to